The impossible request. The crystalline chambers of the Galactic Unity Station had never witnessed such desperation. Ambassador Krexaval of the Orlani floated in his suspension field, his translucent tentacles pulsing with colors of deep anxiety. Across from him, the mechanical form of Coordinator Prime Beta 7 of the Synthari hummed with calculations that kept arriving at the same impossible conclusion. Between them, Elder Whisper of the Villani sat motionless, her forearms folded in meditation as she processed the reports flooding in from the outer territories. The Zerathi were unlike any threat the galaxy had faced in 10,000 years of recorded history. They didn't conquer worlds or enslave populations. They simply consumed everything, not like locusts that at least left the planet intact. The Zerathi converted entire worlds into raw energy, leaving nothing but empty space where solar systems once thrived. In just 8 months, they had erased 32 star systems from existence. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. At their current rate of expansion, the Zerathi would consume the entire galaxy within 15 years. Every military force in the Galactic Unity had tried to stop them. The Orlani's bioships, grown from living coral that could adapt to any threat, had been vaporized before they could evolve defenses. The Synthari's perfectly calculated battle formations and predictive algorithms had failed when faced with an enemy that didn't follow any known patterns of warfare. The Villani's mastery of dimensional phasing, allowing them to slip between realities, proved useless against beings that could consume matter across multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was Coordinator Prime Beta 7 who had suggested the unthinkable. The humans. They were the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel, having only joined the galactic community 40 years ago. Their technology was laughably primitive by galactic standards. They still used chemical propulsion for most of their vehicles. Their computers required physical circuits instead of quantum entanglement. Their weapons fired solid projectiles or used controlled explosions. They were, by every measure the galaxy used, a species that should have been extinct long ago, yet they persisted. More than that, they had somehow survived on a world that the galactic survey teams had classified as a Class 9 death world. Earth, as the humans called it, was a planet where the weather could kill you, the wildlife could kill you, the plants could kill you, and even the microscopic organisms could kill you. The humans had not only survived there but had thrived, spreading across their hostile world and eventually to the stars. When Colonel Marcus Reed walked into the chamber with his small delegation, the alien representatives tried not to show their disappointment. The human stood barely 2 meters tall, small by galactic standards. His uniform was a simple gray fabric with minimal decoration. No energy shields shimmered around him. No exotic weapons hung from his belt. He looked tired, with lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and responsibility. Behind him walked Major Sarah Kim and Captain James Thompson, equally unremarkable in appearance. Ambassador Krexaval spoke first, his translated words carrying undertones of despair. "Colonel Reed, we thank you for responding to our emergency communication. The situation is beyond critical. The Zerathi have—" "We've read the reports," Colonel Reed interrupted, his voice calm and professional. 32 systems destroyed. No successful defensive actions, no effective weapons. You're looking at complete galactic extinction within 15 years. Possibly less if they accelerate. The blunt assessment made the aliens uncomfortable. They were used to diplomatic language and careful phrasing. The humans' direct approach felt almost rude, yet refreshingly honest. Coordinator Prime Beta 7's optical sensors focused on the human. "Our analysis indicates that your military forces number approximately 5 million active personnel, with another 10 million in reserve status. This is insufficient to defend even a single star system against the Zerathi." Colonel Reed nodded. "You're right. We can't match them ship for ship or gun for gun. But that's never been how humans fight anyway." Elder Whisper's mental voice touched their minds gently. "Then how do you propose to help? We do not mean disrespect, but your technology is centuries behind ours and we have failed completely." Major Kim stepped forward, pulling out what looked like an ancient paper map. The alien stared in confusion as she spread it on the conference table. "You've been fighting the Zerathi like they're an enemy military force. You meet them in battle, you engage with your best weapons, and you try to win through superior firepower or technology. That is how warfare is conducted," Ambassador Krexaval said, his tentacles rippling with confusion. That's how duels are conducted, Captain Thompson corrected. War is different. War is about achieving objectives, not winning fights. Sometimes the best way to win a war is to not fight at all. Sometimes it's to fight where the enemy doesn't expect. Sometimes it's to make the enemy fight themselves. The aliens exchanged glances, none of them understanding what the humans were trying to say. Colonel Reed pointed to a section of the map showing the Zarathi's path of destruction. You have a mining colony here, Terminus Point. It's next in their path. Population of 8 million, mostly automated systems mining rare elements. Your plan is to evacuate it, correct? Of course, Coordinator Prime Beta 7 replied. The colony has no strategic value worth defending. The Zarathi will consume it in approximately 12 days. We'll take it, Colonel Reed said simply. The chamber fell silent. Elder Whisper's forearms unfolded in surprise. You wish to defend Terminus Point? With what forces? Give us transport for 100,000 troops and our equipment. We'll handle the rest. Ambassador Krexval's colors shifted to patterns of disbelief. 100,000? The Zarathi will bring millions of their constructs. You'll be overwhelmed in minutes. Colonel Reed smiled, and something about that expression made the aliens feel uneasy. It wasn't a happy smile or a confident smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something others didn't. Ambassador, let me ask you something. In your species' history, have you ever had to fight a war where you were completely outmatched? Where the enemy had every advantage and you had to win anyway or face extinction? The Orlani ambassador's tentacles stilled. No. We've always had technological superiority or numerical advantage in our conflicts. Reed looked at each alien in turn. Humans have been fighting those kinds of wars since we learned to walk upright. We fought predators that were stronger and faster. We fought diseases we couldn't see. We fought weather that could erase entire civilizations. We fought each other with sticks and stones, then with steel, then with atoms. Every single time we were outmatched. And every single time we found a way to win. Not through strength or technology, but through being professional about the business of survival. Major Kim added, You fight wars like they're ceremonies. We fight wars like they're problems to be solved. Give us Terminus Point and we'll show you the difference. The aliens agreed, partly because they had no other options and partly out of morbid curiosity. How could a species with such primitive technology hope to succeed where the galaxy's greatest powers had failed? The human deployment to Terminus Point began 3 days later. The alien observers watched in confusion as the humans ignored all conventional military doctrine. Instead of establishing defensive perimeters around the colony's vital infrastructure, they spread out across the entire planet in small units. Instead of setting up their heaviest weapons in fortified positions, they buried them in seemingly random locations. Instead of maintaining tight communication protocols, they set up hundreds of redundant systems that seemed to serve no purpose. Lieutenant Zhao, a young human officer, explained to a curious Syntheri observer, You're thinking about this wrong. You see defense as a wall that stops the enemy. We see defense as a maze that confuses them, exhausts them, and makes them waste resources. The humans dug. They dug tunnels, trenches, bunkers, and holes. They dug so much that the mining colony's automated systems registered seismic anomalies. They strung primitive wire between positions, set up speakers that played seemingly random noises, and scattered small devices across thousands of square kilometers. When asked about their preparations, Sergeant Martinez, a weathered soldier with 20 years of experience, simply said, War isn't about being strong. It's about being annoying in ways the enemy can't predict or counter. The Zarathi scouts arrived exactly when the human intelligence officers had predicted. The aliens had been shocked when Colonel Reed had told them down to the hour when the enemy would appear. When asked how they knew, the intelligence officer, Captain Walsh, had shrugged. Patterns. Everything follows patterns. The Zarathi consume energy in a specific way, move at specific speeds, and need specific conditions. Once you know the pattern, you know the schedule. The scouts were crystalline beings of pure energy wrapped in shells of transformed matter. They pulsed with power that could vaporize a city block with a thought. They descended toward Terminus Point expecting to find either an abandoned colony or a futile defense force arranged in neat formations. Instead, they found nothing that made sense. The professional solution. The Zarathi scouts swept across Terminus Point's surface, their energy sensors searching for signs of resistance. What they found defied their understanding of warfare. Human positions appeared and disappeared randomly on their scans. Powerful energy signatures flickered in empty wastelands, while populated areas showed no defensive presence at all. Audio sensors detected military communications in 17 different languages, most of which weren't even human languages, but recordings the humans had made of other species' battle communications from previous wars. High above, in the Galactic Unity Observation Station, Ambassador Krexval watched his sensors in bewilderment. What are they doing? There's no pattern to their deployment, no concentration of force. They're scattered like sand across the planet. Coordinator Prime Beta 7's processors worked overtime trying to analyze the human strategy. Their positions violate every principle of defensive warfare. They have no overlapping fields of fire, no centralized command structure visible, no main line of resistance. Elder Whisper, however, noticed something different through her psychic senses. The humans' minds are calm, too calm. They're not afraid or anxious. They feel like workers preparing for a long shift at a factory. The Zarathi main force arrived 12 hours later, just as Captain Walsh had predicted. The swarm was massive, billions of energy constructs that flowed through space like a living aurora. They had consumed entire fleets of the galaxy's most advanced warships. They expected Terminus Point to last perhaps an hour at most. The first wave descended toward the planet's primary mining facility, a massive complex that extracted rare elements from the planet's core. It was the obvious target, the thing any defender would protect most fiercely. The Zarathi allocated 10 million constructs to overwhelm whatever defenses the primitive humans had established there. They found the facility completely abandoned, except for a single human sitting in a lawn chair on the roof, reading a book. Private Johnson looked up as the energy beings surrounded him, their forms crackling with power that could vaporize him in an instant. He carefully marked his place in his book, stood up and waved at the constructs. Then he pressed a small button on a device in his pocket. The entire mining facility exploded, not with conventional explosives, but with something the humans called a cascade failure. They had spent 3 days rewiring the facility's power systems to create a feedback loop that, when triggered, would cause every system to overload simultaneously. The explosion didn't destroy the Zarathi constructs, but it did something worse. It confused them. The Zarathi were beings of pure energy. They saw the universe in terms of energy patterns and flows. The cascade failure created a chaotic storm of electromagnetic radiation, thermal blooms, and quantum fluctuations that overwhelmed their senses. For 30 seconds, 10 million Zarathi constructs were effectively blind and deaf. That's when the humans started their real defense. From hidden positions thousands of kilometers away, human artillery began firing. Not energy weapons or plasma cannons, but simple chemical-propelled shells filled with metallic chaff. The shells burst in the atmosphere above the confused Zarathi, creating clouds of reflective particles that scattered their energy forms and disrupted their ability to communicate with each other. Major Kim watched from her command bunker, which was really just a hole in the ground with some communications equipment. Phase 1 complete. They're separated and confused. Begin Phase 2. Across the planet, small human units began their work. They didn't engage the Zarathi directly. Instead, they attacked the ground beneath them, the air around them, and the electromagnetic spectrum they used to navigate. Humans detonated charges that created massive dust clouds, reducing visibility. They activated jammers that filled every communication frequency with noise. They even used mirrors and reflective surfaces to create false energy signatures that made the Zarathi chase phantoms. Sergeant Williams led one of these units. His squad of 12 soldiers had spent the last hour setting up what they called a kill box, though it wouldn't actually kill any Zarathi. When a group of 1,000 constructs entered their area, following what appeared to be human life signs, Williams' squad activated their trap. Industrial mining lasers, repurposed and automated, began firing in seemingly random patterns. The lasers couldn't hurt the Zarathi, but they could create a lattice of energy that the constructs had to navigate around. Speakers hidden in the rocks began broadcasting the sound of human vehicles and weapons, drawing the Zarathi toward specific paths. Smoke grenades created visual obstacles that forced the energy beings to slow down and reassess. It's like herding cattle, Williams explained to his squad as they watched the Zarathi stumble through their maze. You don't need to be stronger than the cattle. You just need to make it easier for them to go where you want them to go than anywhere else. The Zarathi, For the first time in their existence, were experiencing something they had no frame of reference for: frustration. Every time they tried to form up into their standard attack patterns, something disrupted them. Every time they identified a human position, it turned out to be a decoy. Every time they thought they understood the defensive strategy, it changed. Colonel Reed watched from his mobile command post, which was actually just a modified mining vehicle with good communications equipment. They're starting to adapt. Time for Phase 3. Phase 3 was something the humans called aggressive inconvenience. Instead of trying to destroy the Zarathi, which was impossible with their technology, they focused on making every action the Zarathi took cost more energy than it should. The humans had noticed something crucial about the Zarathi that the other species had missed. The energy beings needed to maintain their coherence in physical space, and doing so required constant energy expenditure. The more chaotic the environment, the more energy they needed to spend. So the humans made Terminus Point as chaotic as possible. They detonated charges in the planet's magnetic field, creating localized distortions that forced the Zarathi to constantly adjust their forms. They released clouds of ionized gas that conducted electricity randomly, creating unpredictable energy surges that the Zarathi had to shield against. They even used the planet's weather control systems to create dust storms, lightning strikes, and temperature variations that all required the Zarathi to expend energy to maintain their stability. Captain Thompson coordinated these efforts from his position. The Zarathi on Grid 77 are slowing down. Hit them with the sonic disruptors. The sonic disruptors were nothing special, just industrial equipment used to break up rock formations in the mines. But when fired at specific frequencies, they created vibrations that interfered with the Zarathi's energy patterns, forcing them to spend even more power to maintain cohesion. After 6 hours of this constant harassment, something unprecedented happened. The Zarathi began to retreat from certain areas, not because they were defeated, but because the energy cost of maintaining their presence there exceeded the energy they could gain from consuming it. In the observation station, the alien observers watched in stunned silence. Coordinator Prime Beta 7's processors struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. The humans aren't winning battles. They're making the battles too expensive to fight. Elder Whisper's psychic senses picked up something from the Zarathi collective consciousness. They're confused. For the first time in their existence, they're encountering resistance that doesn't make sense to them. They can't adapt because there's no pattern to adapt to. Ambassador Krexval's tentacles pulsed with excitement. The humans are fighting entropy itself. They're using chaos as a weapon. But the real revelation came when the Zarathi attempted to bypass the human defenses entirely and consume the planet's core directly. This was their ultimate strategy, one that had never failed. They would send their most powerful constructs deep underground, consume the planet's energy from within, and leave the defenders standing on a dead world. The Zarathi sent 1 million of their strongest constructs boring into the planet. They descended through rock and metal, heading for the rich energy sources of the planet's core. They found Private Chen waiting for them in a small chamber 3 kilometers underground. Playing solitaire on a tablet, Chen looked up as the energy beings surrounded him. "Oh, hello. Right on time. Would you like to know what you're standing in?" The chamber was filled with a fine powder that looked like ordinary dust. It was actually something the humans called thermite, an ancient chemical mixture that burned hot enough to melt steel. But that wasn't the clever part. The clever part was that the humans had mixed the thermite with components from the mining colony's ore processing systems, creating a compound that, when ignited, would undergo a reaction that produced a very specific wavelength of electromagnetic radiation, a wavelength that happened to match the resonance frequency of the Zarathi's energy forms. Chen pressed a button on his tablet. By the way, there are about 3,000 chambers like this one spread throughout the planet's crust. They're all connected by the mining tunnel system. Have fun. The ignition of 3,000 thermite chambers created a planet-wide resonance effect that forced every Zarathi construct underground to expend massive amounts of energy just to maintain their existence. It didn't destroy them, but it made staying underground more expensive than the energy they could extract. The Zarathi collective consciousness had never encountered this concept before. Every other species they had faced had tried to match strength with strength, power with power. The humans were doing something incomprehensible. They were making victory cost more than defeat. After 18 hours of constant harassment, disruption, and energy expenditure, the Zarathi made a decision that shocked every observer in the galaxy. They retreated, not because they were defeated, but because continuing the assault on Terminus Point would cost more energy than they would gain from consuming it. Colonel Reed received the report with the same calm professionalism he had shown throughout the battle. "Good, pack everything up. We're moving to the next colony in their path." The aliens couldn't believe what they had witnessed. Elder Whisper spoke for all of them. "You didn't defeat them. You didn't destroy a single construct. How is this victory?" Major Kim answered, "Victory isn't about destroying the enemy. It's about achieving your objective. Our objective was to defend Terminus Point. Terminus Point is still there. Objective achieved. But they'll just come back," Ambassador Krexval protested. "No, they won't," Captain Thompson said with certainty. "The Zarathi are energy beings. They think in terms of energy economics. We just taught them that humans are bad for business. They'll go around us from now on looking for easier targets." The implications hit the alien observers simultaneously. The humans hadn't won through superior technology or overwhelming force. They had won by being professionally annoying, by understanding the enemy's nature better than the enemy understood themselves, and by turning warfare into an economic calculation where victory was more expensive than retreat. Coordinator Prime Beta 7's processors finally arrived at a conclusion. "You don't fight wars. You solve them." Colonel Reed nodded. "That's what it means to have a professional military. We don't fight for glory or honor or because we enjoy it. We fight because it's our job. And like any job, the goal is to get it done as efficiently as possible with minimum waste and maximum effect." The aftermath of Terminus Point changed everything. The galactic unity didn't need warriors or advanced technology to fight the Zarathi. They needed professionals who understood that war wasn't about strength, but about making the enemy's strength irrelevant. The humans began training other species in what they called asymmetric warfare. They taught the Orlani how to use their bioships to create biological chaos that would disrupt energy beings. They showed the Syntheri how to use their computing power to create information warfare that would confuse collective consciousness. They helped the Velani understand how their dimensional phasing could be used not for escape, but for creating uncertainty and paranoia in enemies that relied on predictable physics. Within a year, the Zarathi threat had been contained. Not defeated, not destroyed, but rendered economically non-viable. The energy beings still existed at the galaxy's edge, but they no longer expanded because they had learned that some prey was simply too expensive to hunt. The galaxy had discovered what humans had known for millennia. Professional soldiers weren't the ones who fought the hardest or had the best weapons. They were the ones who understood that war was just another problem to be solved. And like any problem, the solution often had nothing to do with what seemed obvious. As Colonel Reed had said in his final report to the Galactic Unity, "Amateur warriors fight battles. Professional soldiers end wars." The human military doctrine became required study in every military academy in the galaxy, not because it was sophisticated or advanced, but because it was professional. And in a universe full of advanced civilizations with incredible technology, sometimes the most powerful weapon was simply knowing how to do your job well. The galaxy had learned that humans weren't dangerous because they were strong or smart or technologically advanced. They were dangerous because they treated warfare like a profession, and they were very, very good at their jobs.